Today is October 23rd, 2012. My name is Patrick Rotton with the University of Central Florida History Department of Graduate Studies. We are conducting an oral interview today with Miss Helen Michels, who is a member of the Sanford Grammar School. We are at the Public History Center in Sanford, Florida. Ms. Michels, I wanted to start with some biographical data. When and where were you born?
I was born in Palm Bay, Florida in 1936.
Nice. Did you have any siblings?
Yes.
Yes.
13.
13, wow. How many boys and how many girls?
There were 6 boys and 8 girls.
Boys and 8 girls. And what did your parents do for a living?
My father was a carpenter, and my mother took care of children.
Sounds like it.
She worked hard.
When did you move from Palm Bay to Sanford?
In 1942.
In 1942, so you were 6?
Yes.
What was it like growing up in Sanford?
Well, it was like heaven. I have no recollections of the earlier years, or very few, but in Sanford, there was a big area. We had plenty of space in the house, and there were just lots of things we enjoyed doing. Summer recreation programs and all the way that type.
So when did you first attend school in Sanford?
I started in September of 1942.
1942. And did they have kindergarten, or was that first grade?
It was just first grade. I didn't go to kindergarten.
Oh, okay. What was it like going to school in Sanford?
Well, it was a beautiful experience, especially this building.
Yeah.
This 5 and 6, grades 5 and 6.
Nice. Did you enjoy going to school?
Oh, yes.
Nice.
Most of the time. I enjoyed going until I was about 7th grade, when there was that change where you're going from like grammar school to junior high. I found that to be quite challenging, but all the rest of it was fun. I always loved school.
Oh, did you? What was a typical day like as far as school-wise? I mean, when you were in this building?
It was, I guess, a typical school day. We came in, we pledged the flag, we came in and had just roll call and the regular business of the day. And then we would start whatever. I don't think, like math was early, arithmetic was early. And it was, the teacher, Mrs. Page, made it such fun. We used to play arithmetic baseball and all kinds of things, and it was just fun and interesting. And then we would go on to maybe our spelling class, our regular classes. But one of the things that really sticks out in my memory was playtime. After lunch, we'd have our playtime, and we would run out in the park, out in front, and we would run and play, and we weren't doing texting or cell phones or anything like that. We were just having fun. And when we would go inside, the teacher would, to calm us down, would have us sit at our desks and put our heads down, and she would read a story. She read The Plow Penny Mystery. I do not know the author, but she read that part of it every single day as we would, to calm us down. And then we would have our current events. Was very interesting because she required us, or we got extra points if we had a report on current events before the, I don't know if it was a citizenship class, history class. I can't recall exactly what class, but I do recall the current events. And so every night, the night before, I would sit down with a newspaper and I would have my current event to give. And it was just such a learning experience, keeping up with the world and helping us to stand up in front of the group and give our little reports. They didn't have to be big, but just, it was something that made us so aware. And then we had our reading groups and class and art class, music class. I think that's so, the art class was always such a innovative experience. And personally, I believe so much in the arts, in the education program. Unfortunately, they're being all cut, but the creativeness and the self-esteem that's built up.
Did you have the same teacher for all of the classes, or was there multiple teachers for each of
No,
those classes?
we just had Mrs. Page, and I thought I hit the lottery after 5th grade when we got our teachers for the next year, and I got Miss Page for the 2nd year. I thought I had hit the lottery. That was just the greatest. She was just the greatest teacher. I don't recall her ever scolding us or yelling at us or fussing at us. I mean, she was just a loving mother to us all, and she was strict. Well, we didn't get away with anything, but she called our attention to it in a way that very respectful, but we knew we did not want to do anything wrong because she was so good to us. And I don't recall, I've been tutoring late as a few years ago in the schools, and it was a very, very, very great contrast being in the classroom then and just my memories, however right they are, they're mine, and I just remember it being a wonderful experience. All kinds of activities, skits, plays. Another one of the things that I will remember all my life, we made marionettes from the very beginning up, clothes, everything. And we learned to use all those strings. And I remember I made a witch. It was a Halloween marionette show. But just the memory of participating in the group and standing up and saying your lines behind the curtain, and that helps people if they don't like to talk. But that was a project it was just one of the art projects, but it taught us so many things about sharing with one another, being respectful to one another, and not laughing at each other. And I mean, I don't remember having bullies at that time in history. There must have been, but I do not recall. It was a very respectful, calm atmosphere in the classroom, but very creative, very active.
So were there just 5th and 6th graders here when you went to school? Okay.
Yes.
So before you came here, how was your school set up, I guess, 1st grade through 3rd grade, and what school?
1st grade through 4th grade was Southside Elementary.
Okay.
And it was the same way. We were in the same classroom with the same teacher, and the music teacher came around. The art teacher came around to us, but it was a self-contained classroom except for those activities.
Okay.
And my memory is not, I mean, my favorite 2 years of my school history were 5th and 6th grade. So when I was asked if I would participate, sure, that's.
So of your subjects, the subjects that Miss Page taught you, what was your favorite one to learn about?
I loved science, and that has always been my favorite and my most important interest. And of course the art, considering that a subject, I loved the art. And I think it was in grade school we learned to read music a little bit, but I wasn't very adept at music. That's not a very fond memory. But and I say that you're a history major, but I liked the way we talked about history. And it was like we lived it. We talked about it. We didn't do much. I don't recall memorizing dates and things like that. It was more like what early Florida and what we did and what the early Floridians did. And I've always been fascinated with the Native Americans. Not politically correct to say Indians anymore. So but I think that Math was not my strong point, but I did well because I had to work at that. The others I didn't work very much at it. And spelling, of course, that was fun because we would have spelling matches and last person standing, and just, kids love that challenge and competition, so.
Did Miss Page teach art as well? Was she the art and music teacher, or was there another place in the building that had a specific teacher that did that?
No, she was the one that did all these projects. I can still see us. I brought this thing that I sculptured, which we poured vermiculite and plaster of Paris in milk cartons, and then when it hardened, peeled it off, and we all did our carving. Well, you can see it's still important at this age that I still carry around this, sculpture. But it was just such a beautiful experience, the fun of making out of that block of plaster something. So, and that was Miss Page. The making of the marionettes was Page. The different kinds of art that we did was all Miss Page, so, as I recall. I associate her with it.
Do you remember what room when you came here was the wing, were the wings here, or was it just the main building?
I cannot remember.
Do you remember which classroom you were actually in for those?
It was in the corner classroom on that end.
Okay.
Whether it was in the wing or whether it was in the second floor, it was a second floor classroom. Whether it was, as I say, my memory on that is, but I just remember being a corner classroom.
All right. Part of our project, we're trying to get the history of this building. Do you remember where was the cafeteria at in relation to?
I do not remember a cafeteria. I do not have any recollection of a cafeteria. And it might have been because with 13, 14 children, we packed bag lunches. And I do know that across the park, which is now the park, I don't believe that street was open there, not during recess. We would go across the street and use our nickels to buy, there was a little candy store, and we would buy that candy. But I do not, last night trying to, where was the cafeteria? We would have had to have had a cafeteria, but I could not recall it.
So, as far as were there clubs or sports here at the school while you were going to school here? Or?
No, there were sports, but not competitive sports. I mean, there was play. We didn't have teams of any kind to compete that I recall. I know that we were encouraged to join the Girl Scouts, and I became a Girl Scout that year, which was another great experience for me to get to know other people. That was not on campus, that was off campus. And I know that another thing that Ms. Page did was walk us to the public library, which was a couple blocks from here. And each one of us got a library card. And so I could walk after school to get my books and be back when my dad would pick me up later on in the afternoon, or maybe I'd come up on weekends, but I know that I would get 4 and 5 books each time I checked out books, because I really attribute to Miss Page the love for reading. And to me, that's been one of my greatest pleasures in life is reading, and it still is. I like to hold a book in my hand. I'm of that generation. I like to have the book, not the little readers. But she showed us how to use the Dewey Decimal System in the library. She would tell us to look up such and such a book, give each one of us look it up in the card catalog and go and find the book. And so it was just, we learned to manipulate, or to maneuver in a library system, which at that time, all library systems were pretty much the same. No matter where you go, you had that background and you had that training. So I am eternally grateful for the love for reading that was instilled in us. and that has stood me well.
Did you go to school when you were going to school here? Were any of your siblings in the same grade or the grade above or below you?
No.
Were they just a couple years out or?
Oh, wait a minute. I think my sister was 2 years above me, so this was a 2-year school. The sister that's next to me, and my brother, I think he might have been held back a year, so he was just behind me. So when I finished school, he came into school, if I recall.
What are some of the memories you have with your classmates? I mean, out just in class.
Well, I have a picture of my class, and I could not find it today, but I could tell you the name of practically every child in that class. And we grew up, we played together, we shared together, we talked together, and I know that in 6th grade, one of my very, very closest friends moved away, but I thought that was the end of the world, because we would get on the phone, we would talk at lunchtime, talk at playtime, but I just remember various ones and their names, and the one that was the clown in the class, and David Parks, who was always drawing, and today he draws the sketches, what do you call them, for the newspapers, cartoons.
Yes.
For the newspapers. He's still, but I remember he was such a nice kid. And of course at that age it's mostly girls and boys, and the girls interested in attracting the boys, but you know, the giddy 11, 12-year-olds, where you don't want to be a grown-up, and yet you don't want to be a child, you don't want to be a grown-up. So there was a lot of teasing going back and forth, but I wouldn't call it hurtful teasing, you know. So passing notes in school, and just a look of Paige's eyes if you got caught using it. But I know there's a lady that I hope that I'm sure that they have interviewed, is Grace Marie Steinzeifer, who was she is the historian in the class. She's the one that gets the class reunions together and organizes all that, but she also writes history, a lot of histories, and I'm certain that they have contacted her, because she writes, I think even today she still writes in the paper of things from the class.
At this point in your school career, was there anything that you wanted to be when you grew up?
I don't think I wanted to be anything. I wanted a horse.
You wanted a horse?
I wanted a horse. And Mother always promised me a horse when we have a place to put it, so I never got a horse. But I got a chemistry set for Christmas in 5th grade, and I would love to start making experiments with my chemistry set. In fact, when I went to college, I started out as a lab technician, but I found out I liked people more than test tubes, so I changed my major. But that was, I think probably I was leaning toward that. I loved animals. I don't think I wanted to be a vet. I don't think that entered into my head. But I wanted to be a school teacher. I ended up being a school teacher for many years. So I think that was part of it. I would take my little brothers and sisters in the summertime, and I would teach them. We'd have school at home during the summertime, and couldn't wait for school to start again. And they didn't like it that much. They didn't like school that much, but I.
So when did you said you grew up to be a teacher? Did you teach in this area?
No, I taught in Hollywood, Melbourne, And then I went to Puerto Rico to teach high school science. And from there I became very socially conscious of so many problems that students were having because of the justice situations. And so I studied and went into drug therapy work. And then from there I was doing that for about, I taught, let's say, I taught 14 years in all, grade school in Melbourne and Hollywood. And then when I went to Puerto Rico, I taught in the high school sciences. And then I went into drug therapy for about 10 years. And then they asked me to direct the halfway house for federal prisoners in Puerto Rico. They were just opening a halfway house for federal prisoners. And the company that, the drug treatment company won the bid for the halfway house. So because of my English, bilingual, they needed someone who would be able to handle that. So for 25 years I directed the halfway house in Puerto Rico for federal prisoners, and then retired back here to most of my family is still in the Sanford area.
When you went from the 6th grade to the 7th grade, was there a graduation ceremony type deal, or was it just kind of a...
Oh, I'm sure there was. One of the things that it's interesting that here in the grammar school we celebrated May Day. We had the maypole dance.
I'm not sure what that is.
Well, I don't know either.
Okay.
But we all got dressed up, and you have ribbons tied to all different ribbons, and then you do a dance and weave in and out so that it actually probably has some kind of an ethnic background, because it's the Day of the Worker. It's the Germanic type of, I think it comes from the Germanic background. But I know that that was a big occasion where we would do the dance and get all dressed up in I think we even made, if I'm not mistaken, I have a recollection of making crepe paper dresses to wear in the different colors. So it was a very colorful occasion.
When you went to high school, where was high school at?
It was Seminole High School, which today is middle school, but it was right just across down French Ave, down 1792.
When you were in high school, as you got older, what did you and your friends do?
Oh gosh. I don't know if I want them on camera. No, we just hung out a lot. There were all kinds of sports in high school. Our gym teacher did not approve of intramural, did not approve of competition in having a school team to go to other schools to compete. She believed and got the support that everybody should participate in sports and everybody should learn all the sports. So of course I loved that. We had intramural sports against the different classes. In fact, at one time, my softball team from my class and my sister's softball team from her class won. The two of us were in competition for the intramural final game. She won. Their team won. But it was, and I truly think that it's something to be questioned about. All money that goes into sports programs for a few, and we learned how to play football, basketball, softball, archery, and we had 6 weeks of exercises. That wasn't fun, but running and track. But we did a lot of sports activities, and we had the pep club, which was accompanied the marching band because they did have the boys teams, and the pep club was like a marching group with that, and I was in that for all 4 years. And so my friends we would camp out. We would go, on our own, not related to school. We'd go out, have a Coke. It's very interesting because none of us smoked or drank all the way through high school of the group that I hung around with. And then we went to college and we came back for the first class reunion. Everybody pulls out cigarettes. So it didn't last. But that was the influence of that particular teacher, because she just encouraged us to live a healthy lifestyle and keep our bodies strong and healthy, and that was not strong, that wasn't good for your health. So it was, a lot of that was that influence.
So was it a physical, it was just, I guess, a PE class?
Yes.
Is what it was? And was it co-ed? I mean,
No.
So it was all just girls?
It was, the girls had their program, the boys had their program.
Did the boys' sports teams travel?
Yes.
Okay, so
We had competition for the football and the basketball and the softball games.
and of the sports, which one was your favorite?
To playing,
Mm-hmm.
it would be hard to say. Basketball, volleyball, probably basketball and volleyball. Softball I liked too, but that was.
As you got into high school, I know you said that Miss Page was your favorite teacher. Did you have a favorite teacher in high school as well?
Well, it was the PE teacher,
Oh, it was.
because she was such a model. I mean, she was such a good person. And in fact, instead of study hall, I really didn't have to study real hard. School was pretty easy for me. And so I didn't have to study very hard. So you had a study hall period during the day, but I always was an assistant to the gym teacher, getting the equipment out and refereeing or umpiring or whatever, one of the classes. So I actually had 2 PE classes all through high school. I also might say that I had an almost perfect attendance record through the 4 years of high school. And Babe Ruth came to Sanford to visit, and I skipped school to go to see Babe Ruth with my friends, and the principal was there. We got caught, so I messed up my record on that, but it was worth it.
What was the most popular spot in town for teenagers to hang out?
The Pig and Whistle.
And is that still?
No, it's no longer open.
But where was it located?
Seems like it was located on somewhere about 25th Street. Others in my family could tell you. I can't recall exactly. It was a drive-in where you would just drive up to the car and the waitress would come out to the car and take your order, and we'd hang out there. They had the high school had what they call the celery crate. Sanford at that time was the top celery producing city in the world, and they leached all the chemicals out of the ground with the celery, but that's okay. I mean, it's not okay. They had to rebuild this. They're still rebuilding it. But our team was the celery feds. The teams were all the celery feds. So we had the celery crate, which was like a hangout, but that was for activities. You'd have specific dances and parties there at that. And then I think mostly going to the movies, and if we were really, we would go to Orlando to the movie. If we didn't like the theaters right down here in Sanford, in the middle of Sanford, that we went to, the Ritz Theater. But if it was something really a good movie, we would pile in and go to Orlando.
And was it an enclosed theater or was it a drive-in?
They did have a drive-in, but we would go more to at least I preferred the theaters. I didn't like the drive-ins. I didn't like the sound. but I went to the drive-ins. And then, but with just a lot of we didn't, like today the kids hang out at the mall. We didn't have a mall. Downtown Sanford, you didn't do that much. It was more in one home or another home, and we did a lot of, I say, outdoors activities. We'd go swimming for the day, go over to the beach. That was always one of our favorites, was piling in and getting a gang together and going over to the beach and going swimming.
So what year did you graduate high school?
1954.
Do you still keep in touch with any of your classmates?
No, because I was in Puerto Rico for about 40 years. I did go to the last class reunion we had, but none of the ones that hung out with me, the group that most hung out with me, wasn't there. They have all moved away or whatever, and just not, we were kind of rebels and not so much into social activities and that kind of a thing. So we were just, so because they didn't come, it wasn't as much fun for me. I was happy to see some of my friends, but none of them were my close friends. There were a group of about 10 of us that were really close.
Do you know anybody else from your class or from your time of going to school that you think would be willing to participate in one of these interviews as well?
If I got my list, I could have a list of all the addresses, and I could maybe contact you to give you some suggestions for that.
That'll work. Well, do you have any other school memories that you'd like to share that may be something that we haven't covered?
I remember one thing. I have become very strongly involved in the justice movement, peace and justice, the problems that are facing us today, and been working very much in my spare time right now in different organizations to try to bring about. That was something that was encouraged from my family even when I was very young. We lived across the street we lived in a celery field. Actually, we lived a big house, but there was a celery field around it. And across the street were the Cutters, some of the little shanties of the Cutters. And at that time in Sanford, it was very segregated. Mm-hmm. But we would play with those kids. They weren't in our school because it was separate education, supposedly equal, but that's a joke. But my mother never had any problem with that. She would never, ever, we would get our mouth washed out with soap if we said the N-word. And God doesn't see colors. God's colorblind. Everybody's equal. Nobody is less than anybody. So that was kind of what I grew up with. And that's been part of my formation, part of my principles. And what can I do to make a difference when I'm gone? What will be left? And so, the gym teacher had the pep club. They had not gotten the returns from the Easter Seals, the Easter Seals organization. So they called her to see how they could help us. So a month after Easter, here we are, the pep club, all dressed in our uniforms on First Street, Sanford, selling Easter seals. And my mother said, "You are crazy. People don't buy Easter seals after Easter." I said, "Well, we're just trying to remind them, and we're just asking them, if you haven't sent in your money, please send in your money." But that was the kind of thing that we were just made very conscious of needs of others. And of course, in the grade school, that was wartime. And so we were very war conscious. I mean, we were very conscious of bringing in bottle caps and bringing in tin cans and soap, and we just, lard. We just had all these things that we were made very conscious. And Victory Garden, we had to make, everybody had a Victory Garden. In fact, in 3rd grade, I won a prize. I won a bond, a savings bond, for an essay that I wrote about how to make a Victory Garden. And that was big, big, big for me. So those are the kinds of things that my memories are very happy memories for my school, as I say, except for the junior high where you're forced into where you're growing up and you don't want to grow up. And yet you don't want to be a baby. You know, that I think I didn't fail. I had all good grades, but the principal called my mother and said I was going to be retained because I was missing too much school. I didn't miss another day of school. I suddenly didn't have a headache in the morning, and I suddenly didn't have a stomach ache because I didn't want to repeat the grade. Even though I had good grades, that didn't matter if I didn't fulfill that requirement. So I remember, apart from that short span, I just remember the Sanford schools as enjoyable. The city of Sanford had a sports program during the summer for recreation, city recreation, and we would always participate in that. And in the summertime, my mother took all of us to the lake every day because she was not happy till all of us knew how to swim. So things like that but that's not related to school, but.
So you went to school during the war. I know that you said you were 1st grade, 2nd grade. Was any of the curriculum kind of turned towards?
It was a lot toward be good citizens, citizenship, being patriotic. I can remember a lot of learning the Star Spangled Banner. It was also very interesting because it was also had a really strong religious, like you got a little Bible if you learn the 23rd Psalm and things like that would never be tolerated today. But it also had and that's typical of Sanford and the religious church on every corner practically as you go down Park Avenue. I don't know how many, but there are lots of churches. But I do remember, though, it was that sense of, there was a strong sense of patriotism and what can you do to help the war effort? And you felt like you were really, when you would bring in some cans, and I remember the rationing and things like that. You had your coupons, and I think at one time I had to go to church for classes to make my first communion, and my brother towed me on his bicycle because we didn't have gasoline. So it was about a 3-mile ride on the bicycle. I remember things like that. We couldn't do all the things we wanted to do, and we didn't have all the sugar or things that were rationed. So definitely it impacted, I think, more. My brothers were all in war, and my oldest brother was active duty he was a CB. That's a construction unit of the Navy, and he was injured. So my mother tried not to frighten us, but I knew that something wasn't right. I knew that there was this tenseness, but that was by the time we got into grammar school, it was over. Yeah. So then it was just like that happy time, and after the war, after the prosperity that was coming on, and my dad got a better job, and so it was like that all added to my happiness of being in grammar school.
All right, well, that's all the questions I have for you, unless there's anything else you would like to share.
I can't I don't think of anything specific. I know that all of my teachers, I felt like all of my teachers were wonderful teachers. And I can't remember her name, but my high school teacher that insisted that my counselor that insisted that I take typing, I have blessed her 1,000 times over when I had to do all those term papers in college and had to type it, even now on the computer. So, but I felt that all of the teachers were dedicated, and some were very strict, some were less strict, but I don't know if I should say this on camera, but the high school coaches taught the history in high school. That was disastrous. That was disastrous. You just had to duck the erasers as they were being thrown. But that's probably one of my weak subjects, and I think that's one of the contributing factors on that. But all of the rest, I mean, they were appointed to do that job, but they were committed to what they were. They were committed to being coaches, and they were good coaches. But the history teachers, as history teachers, and so I think that but I could say that there was not one teacher, in fact, not one teacher that I could not say I thought was committed to her students. I have a brother who's mentally challenged, and he went to public school in the first grade. He simply could not learn. And the public school teacher, Miss Welch, tutored him every day after school for an hour at no cost. She would not accept anything for it because she was committed. She was wanting so badly that he learned to read and write. Well, he never did. We found he had a brain injury that damaged part of the brain, and he just could not get that abstraction concept of letters or numbers. But I just think that that's an example of the public school teacher at that time, at that epoch in Sanford, that they were committed people to their jobs.
Well, I want to thank you for doing this, and this is going to become a part of the collection here at the Public History Center, so thank you for coming.
Well, I enjoyed being with you and sharing.